There comes a moment in every life when you can no longer blend in with the background, when your heart whispers, "This is your time to stand." We live in a world that rewards comfort, celebrates compromise, and silences conviction. But my friend, the truth of your destiny begins when you decide to take a stand, not tomorrow, not someday, but today. Standing for what is right is not easy. It never has been, it never will be. But every story of greatness begins with someone who dared to be different. Think of Daniel in the lion's den refusing to bow. Think of Esther standing before a king to save her people. Think of ordinary men and women who stood up for what was true, even when the crowd turned away. And so I ask you today, what stand will you take? Will you stand for integrity when others choose the easy way? Will you stand for truth when lies sound louder? Will you stand for faith when fear tells you to sit down? You see, courage is not the absence of fear. It is faith pressing forward despite it. Every strong soul you've ever admired made that same decision to take their stand, even if no one else joined them. Let me tell you something important. Neutrality is not safety. When you remain silent in the face of wrong, you have taken a stand, but for the wrong side. When you compromise your values for acceptance, you have taken a stand, but against your calling. The world does not need more silent observers. It needs people of conviction who will say, "Enough! I will not bow. I will not break. I will stand." And here's what happens when you do. Heaven notices. When you stand, even trembling, God strengthens your feet. When you speak truth, even softly, God multiplies your words. And when you hold firm to what is right, you are never standing alone. There's a divine partnership that happens when courage meets conviction. You become part of something greater than yourself. Your life becomes a testimony, a living sermon to everyone watching that faith is real, that truth is alive, that God still works through ordinary people who dare to take a stand. Maybe you feel weak right now. Maybe the battles around you seem too strong. But the power to stand is not found in your strength. It's found in your surrender. When you surrender to God's will, He gives you the strength to stand against the world's pressure. When you stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and start asking, "What does God think of me?" you'll find the courage that has been waiting inside you all along. So take your stand today. Stand for your family. Stand for your faith. Stand for your integrity, your dreams, and your destiny. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There isn't one. Don't wait for everyone to agree. They won't. Don't wait for the fear to disappear. It won't. Just stand, because when you stand, others will see. And when they see, they'll rise too. You may not change the whole world, but you will change your world, and that's where real revival begins. So let this be the moment, let this be the day. When history looks back and heaven looks down, may it be said, they took their stand and the world was never the same. There comes a moment, my friend, when every generation must face its defining test. And make no mistake about it, we are standing in ours right now. We are not the first, and we will not be the last. But what we decide to do in this moment will echo far beyond us. Every generation faces a line in the sand, a moment when silence becomes surrender, when neutrality becomes compromise, when the easy way becomes the wrong way. And I believe with all my heart that God is calling us to stand. You see, the challenges we face today are not merely cultural. They are spiritual. The battle is not fought with weapons, but with will, not with noise, but with conviction. There was a time when truth was clear, when right and wrong were not suggestions, but convictions. But now, we live in a world that tells us truth is flexible, that values are optional, that faith is a matter of convenience. And yet, deep in your heart, you know that's not true. Something within you cries out, "I can't just watch this happen. I must stand." Every great movement of faith began with someone who said, "Enough." When Noah built the ark, he stood against a mocking world. When Moses confronted Pharaoh, he stood against impossible odds. When the prophets spoke truth to power, they stood alone. But they were not abandoned. Their courage became the turning point for their generation. And now it's your turn. Your moment may not come with thunder or lightning. It may come quietly in the choices you make, in the values you hold, in the conversations where you choose not to stay silent. It may come in the face of rejection, misunderstanding, or loneliness. But in that moment, when your faith is tested, remember this: every generation has its defining stand, and every believer has their defining moment. So don't wait for someone else to rise first. Don't wait for the crowd to applaud your courage. The call to stand is not given to the comfortable, it's given to the committed. And when you take that stand, even if it feels small, even if it feels unseen, heaven sees it. God records it. And your stand becomes part of a story far greater than your own. There comes a moment when your convictions will collide with your comfort, and in that moment, the true measure of your faith will be revealed. It's easy to talk about courage when the crowd agrees with you, but it's another thing entirely to hold your ground when the world pushes back. We all love peace. We all long for acceptance, but there is a higher calling to live by truth, not by approval. And if you're going to take a stand in this generation, you must decide that your convictions mean more to you than your comfort ever could. Too many people want the reward of faith without the risk of obedience. They want to walk with God as long as the path is smooth, as long as the applause is loud, as long as the cost is small. But faith doesn't flourish in comfort, it grows in challenge. Conviction is forged in the fire of testing, and the flame that burns the weakest faith away leaves behind the gold of endurance. You see, comfort whispers, stay quiet, don't cause trouble, blend in. But conviction shouts, stand up, speak truth, don't bow down. Comfort says, protect your image. Conviction says, protect your integrity. Comfort says, do what feels good. Conviction says, do what is right. And the difference between the two determines whether you will drift with the world or walk with God. When you live for comfort, you will always find excuses. When you live for conviction, you will always find courage. The heroes of Scripture weren't comfortable people. They were courageous people. Abraham left everything familiar because conviction told him there was more. Joseph stood firm in temptation because conviction mattered more than pleasure. Daniel opened his window and prayed when the law said to hide because conviction outweighed fear. And I believe that's what our world desperately needs again. Men and women whose hearts are ruled not by convenience, but by conviction. People who will say, I won't trade what's eternal for what's easy. People who understand that obedience sometimes costs popularity, that truth sometimes costs comfort, and that standing firm sometimes means standing alone. Because in the end, it's your conviction that defines you, not the comfort you cling to, but the truth you refuse to compromise. And when you live by conviction, something remarkable begins to happen. Your stand starts to shine like a light in the darkness. You may think it's just one small act of faith, one quiet choice of integrity, one whispered no to compromise. But heaven sees it differently. What feels small to you can ignite something far greater than you imagine. One person's stand, rooted in truth, can set in motion a wave of courage that reaches places you'll never go. Think about it. History is filled with people who stood alone, and by doing so, changed everything. Moses stood before Pharaoh and said, let my people go, and a nation was born in freedom. David stood before Goliath with nothing but a sling and faith, and fear lost its grip on an army. Esther stood before a king, risking her life, and an entire people were saved. These weren't extraordinary people by the world's standards. They were ordinary men and women with extraordinary conviction, and their stand became the spark that lit the fire of change. And maybe that's what God is calling you to today. Maybe your single step of courage is the missing piece someone else needs to take their own. Maybe your strength to speak truth in your workplace inspires another to stop hiding their faith. Maybe your quiet consistency at home gives hope to someone who's ready to give up. That's the power of one stand. Courage is contagious. Integrity spreads. faith multiplies. Don't underestimate the influence of a single life anchored in conviction. You might never preach a sermon, never stand on a stage, never write a book, but when you choose to stand for what is right, your life becomes the message. Someone is always watching how you live, how you respond, how you endure. And when they see you stand firm, it gives them permission to believe they can too. The world doesn't need louder voices, it needs brighter examples. You may not be able to change the entire world, but you can change the atmosphere around you. And sometimes that's exactly how the world begins to change. One person, one act of courage, one stand at a time. And that's why the stand you take cannot wait for tomorrow, because faith was never meant to be passive. It was never meant to sit quietly on the sidelines and hope things get better. Faith moves, faith acts. Faith steps forward when fear says, stay still. The moment you decide to act on what you believe, that's when faith becomes alive, not a theory, not a phrase, but a force that reshapes your life and the lives around you. Too many people say, one day I'll take my stand, one day I'll do what's right, one day I'll live boldly, but that one day never comes because hesitation is the thief of conviction. The longer you wait, the softer your voice becomes and the smaller your courage feels. But the truth is, the only moment you are guaranteed is this one today. That's why the stand you take today is not just about courage, it's about obedience. It's about answering the call of God right now, right where you are. Faith is not built in comfort, it's built in motion. When Abraham left his homeland, he didn't have all the answers, he just obeyed. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he didn't know if he'd sink, he just trusted. When the woman with the issue of blood reached out to touch the hem of Jesus' garment, she didn't have a plan, she just believed. Every one of them acted in the present moment. They didn't wait until fear was gone, because faith doesn't wait for fear to leave, it moves through it. And that's what God is asking of you. Take your stand today, not because it's easy, but because your future depends on it. The decisions you make now, the small, unseen moments of obedience are shaping the person you are becoming tomorrow. If you want a stronger faith, act on it now. If you want to see change, start where you stand. If you want to walk in courage, take the first step even while your knees are shaking. Faith that waits for perfect conditions never moves at all. But the faith that acts today in the face of uncertainty becomes the faith that transforms everything. And when you take that step of faith today, when you choose to stand firm in the face of opposition, something sacred happens. Heaven takes notice. God has never overlooked a single act of courage done in His name. When others turn their backs, He turns His face toward you. When you stand for what is right while the world mocks and misunderstands, God records that moment as a testimony of faith. You may feel alone on earth, but all of heaven stands in applause. Every time you choose to remain faithful, when compromise looks easier, you are making a declaration, not just to the world, but to the one who called you. And He honors that. He strengthens the weary heart. He lifts the trembling hands, and He gives courage to the one who refuses to bow. You may not see the reward immediately, but I promise you there is divine power in every decision to stand for what is true. Remember the 3 Hebrew men in Babylon. They stood while everyone else bowed. They didn't know if they'd survive the fire, but they knew they couldn't betray their faith. And what happened? The fire didn't consume them. It revealed God's presence among them. That's what happens when you stand. The pressure may rise, the flames may roar, but the same God who walked with them walks with you. The very test that was meant to destroy you becomes the testimony that defines you. Standing for truth will never be popular, but it will always be powerful. The applause of the crowd fades, but the approval of heaven endures. And even when it feels like your stand is small, it is never wasted. God uses it to strengthen others, to shift atmospheres, to remind the world that faith is still alive. So when the world says, bow down, and your heart says, stand up, trust that God is on your side. He has never abandoned those who stand for him. And when the dust settles, when the noise fades, it will be your stand, your steadfast, quiet, courageous stand that shines as a beacon of faith, testifying that God honors those who stand when others bow.